It is August 20th, and I have started reading my June TBR Spin pick. So I am super behind in my TBR Spin books, and I'm super behind playing TBR Spin. If you're not familiar with TBR Spin, it is a super fun booktube game where you try to read down your TBR. So it was created by Jill at the Book Bully and Sarah from Freshly Read Books, and every month they spin a wheel. At the beginning of the year, we picked 12 books, one for every month, and when they spin the wheel, a prompt comes up to help you pick one of those books. So at the beginning of the year, we had 12 books, we spun the wheel, and then in February, we had 11 books, and then we spun the wheel, etc., etc. Each time the wheel spins, the prompt comes off the wheel, so there's never the chance of getting two prompts. There is a chance of having to swap out your stack or not having a book on your stack that fits the prompt, so you might have to go back to your TBR and pick a different book and swap that out. I like the swaps. I think that's super fun. I vlog all of my TBR Spin books, so at the end of each video you can see the spin for the next book and see what I pick. Last month in July, I read my May book, and at the end of that vlog I watched the spin for June, and for June the prompt was to pick the book that you want to read most off of your list. Since it was July when I was spinning the wheel, and since the prompt I got for June I was planning on reading in July, I ended up picking Her Body and Other Parties. I didn't actually get to this one until August, partly because I was reading a lot of other books, partly because I was traveling in July, partly because the May book took me so long. It was a long time before I picked the June book, and partly because I was reading two other short story collections. I was reading 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Bastarrica, and I was reading The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson. I did complete this one, but I didn't complete The Lottery and Other Stories because it has like 40 short stories in it, and I've been reading it slowly over the year. I was hesitant to pick up another short story collection, especially because I didn't want to get all the stories confused and all the different books confused, but also because reading so many short stories really burnt me out. I really didn't like 19 Claws and a Blackbird, sadly, and so I was really nervous to start another short story collection. What I was hoping to happen was that I would pick up Her Body and Other Parties by Carman Maria Machado, and it would be a redemption of all those stories. The Shirley Jackson short stories are all amazing, but I still had a short story burnout, and I was hoping that this would fix that burnout and not add to it, and I'm glad to say that it did. I've only ever read one Carman Maria Machado before this, and it was a short story that I got free with one of my subscriptions, and I really loved that short story. I thought it was really great. Of course, I can't remember what it was called, but I will put a picture of it here. For a very, very short story, it had suspense, it had intrigue, it had epistolary elements, it had horror. It was so good. So I was really excited to read Her Body and Other Parties, and I definitely feel the same way about this. I've read 4 stories so far from this one. I read The Husband's Stitch, Inventory, Mother, and Especially Heinous. So the first 4 stories, and then there's 4 more stories to go. The Husband's Stitch is a retelling, reimagining of the myth or urban legend of the girl with the green bow around her neck. So you might remember that from Scary Stories You Tell in the Dark, and it is about a girl who has a green ribbon around her neck. She falls in love with the boy. The boy wants to know what the ribbon's all about, and she won't tell him. That's the basic premise of the story. So in this retelling, The Husband's Stitch, Machado is retelling that story, but she's also relating a lot of other urban myths as well. And she's telling the story of the green bow from the perspective of the woman with the green bow. So it's an interesting mix of like urban legend, a little bit of like modern horror, like / domestic horror of husband-wife dynamics and everything. And there also is quite a bit of sex, like the taboos of urban legends, the myths, is kind of mixed with taboos of sex, and the idea that sexual desire, especially in women, is a horror story or is a taboo. So that one was really interesting. It's also really funny because my husband and I were just talking about that story like a few days before I started this, which I just think is so weird. And we were trying to remember what the premise of that story was, and it was just really strange that then I read a story that also had to do with that old urban legend. The next story, Inventory, has been my favorite so far, and it is told in sort of epistolary style where there's little entries, little paragraphs, and each one starts with one girl, one boy, one girl, and they're one person's sexual encounters throughout their entire life. But throughout these sexual encounters, these small snippets and stories of this woman's sexual life and sexual awakening, we also read a larger story about the world, and it's very, very short, and I thought it was very powerful, very cool, very horror bent. It reminded me a little bit of a children's Bible or Leave the World Behind, in the idea that you never fully know what's going on outside the world, because this perspective that you're getting is only this diary entry about a person that this woman slept with or a person that this woman fell in love with. So I love that one. That one's my favorite. Next is Mothers, and this is about a woman in an abusive relationship and a child that appears kind of from that relationship. I didn't love this one as much, although I do really like the way that Carman Maria Machado structures her stories, and that the structure of each story is different, and sometimes there's flashbacks, sometimes there's flash forwards, sometimes there's interjections, and you need to read the whole story to understand the whole story. You need to read all the pages to understand the story, and sometimes when you're reading you don't know how they're all going to come together. I felt that way about the very first story that I ever read from her, but then in the end they do all come together. She really has a masterful way of following through on everything, on connecting everything, on, even if you're a little bit confused, making you want to find the finish of each story. And that goes for the fourth story that is in this book, which is Especially Heinous. This is 272 Views of Law and Order SVU. So this is another sort of epistolary style short story, and each little vignette in this short story, which is actually quite long, it's like 60 pages or something, is an episode of SVU. So we are with true SVU characters like Stabler and Benson, and we are following them through many seasons of the TV show in these little vignette explanations of each episode. So they are only like the blurb that you would get from a TV guide or something like that, which is really, really fun. And then of course, being a horror story and being a Carman Maria Machado story, the episodes and the idea and the overarching story goes totally off the rails. So I really did like this one as well. I think it would help, or does help, or did help, having some knowledge of SVU and having some knowledge of Law and Order in general. I think if you were from a different country or you had never watched that show before, it might be a little bit confusing. I mean, it was a little bit confusing no matter what. I think it was beneficial to have watched SVU and know more about it. So the next story that I have to read is Real Women Have Bodies, and then I have 3 more stories after that. But I'm just about halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway through this book. I will definitely come back to you. I'll probably read all 4 of the other stories. I read the first 4 about a week ago, and I've kind of taken a break to read other things and finish up other things that I'm working on. So I probably won't read them right away, but when I do read them, I will come back to you and let you know my thoughts. Let me know if you've read any Carman Maria Machado. Let me know what you think of her work. I also have her semi-autobiographical or autobiographical short story collection in the Dream House, which I think mostly all has to do with an abusive relationship that she was in. In a lot of these stories, there are abusive relationships, and you can kind of tell/feel that she knows what that's like from firsthand experience, even in the little glimpses we get in this book. So I am super eager to read that one, but I think it's going to be a really tough read. And then I don't think she has any novels, which I would love to read a novel from her, and I would love to read more from her because so far I'm loving her work. is August 26th, and I have finished my June book for TBR Spin. In the first clip, I read the first 4 stories, and now I have finished the last 4 stories. I definitely liked the first 4 stories better. I definitely connected with them more. In the second half, we have Real Women Have Bodies, which is about a young girl who works in a dress shop. I did really like that one. Then the next one is 8 Bites, and this is about a family of women who have larger bodies and who get surgery to lose weight, and also about their relationship with their mother, their relationship with each other, and just the relationship between mothers and daughters. The next story is The Resident. This is the long story out of these 4. It's like 50 pages or 60 pages, and this is about a young woman going to a resident retreat or like a artist retreat to work on a book. I thought this one was interesting, but it felt, especially for being like 50 pages, one of the longest stories in here, it felt very incomplete. Not as well formed as a lot of the other stories in this collection. And then lastly, we have Difficult at Parties, which is a story about a woman who's gone through a traumatic experience and her relationship with her boyfriend after that traumatic experience. So all really interesting. Definitely lots of themes of women, women's bodies, violence against women, insanity or perceived insanity, a lot of themes of relationships, women's relationships, how they relate to other people, lots of themes of love, lots of sex in this one. All really interesting, and definitely, like I said earlier, I have recently read a bunch of short story collections that I felt were not super cohesive or not super well formed, where the stories felt very intangible or like very unfinished. And this, all the stories pretty much felt complete, felt like they were getting the point across that the author wanted, like they had deeper meanings, deeper themes, deeper thoughts put into them than just the most obvious things that you could read about these stories. I think that Carman Maria Machado is probably one of my current favorite authors of short stories. Because she hasn't written a full-length novel, it's hard to say that she's a new favorite author in general, but I've really enjoyed some of the short stories that I've read from her, and I've liked all the other ones that I've read from her. So, super glad to have read this. I also have In the Dream House, which is her nonfiction, or what's that called, autofiction story of an abusive relationship that she had. So I'm super excited to read this one at some point as well. Her Body and Other Parties was heavy. This one's gonna be like even more heavy and like even more intense, but it's probably worth it because she's such a great author. So now it is time to pick our next TBR Spin book. Let's look at the TBR Spin books that I have left. Just a reminder, we're picking for July. It's August 26th today, and we're picking for July. I have The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This is a novella and short stories. Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. This, I think, is a novel told with lots of different aspects like verse. How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Arthurs. This is short stories. The Spirit of Science Fiction by Roberto Bolaño. This is a novella. The Stationery Shop by Marhan Kamali. This is a novel. I recently got another Marhan Kamali, so this might be a good one to read. And The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Caw and Richard Kadrey. So let's watch Sarah's video. Sarah did the July prompt, and I have her video pulled up. I did watch most of this video because Sarah lately has been doing like updates of her life and updates of what's going on. She recently moved to Colorado, so it's been fun to watch her videos up until the point of the spin. So I've watched this video the entire way except for the actual spin. Oh, it's funny because I didn't realize, but Sarah has In the Dream House in her TBR stack. So maybe she'll pick it for this prompt. Okay, interesting. This is a really weird prompt, one that we haven't had something similar to this before, but it is book on your stack with the biggest font. So let me look and see. Oh, This one's the biggest, for sure. Okay, pretty clear winner here. And I should have known it's the book of the month book because usually the font in these is pretty huge, but this was noticeably, obviously bigger font than the other books. So for our July pick, which we will probably be reading in August or September, we have The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. So like I said, this is a novella and then a collection of short stories. I don't know if one comes first or if the novella is in the middle or what, but that's exciting. I purposely picked a lot of short story collections for this TBR spin because I have a lot of short story collections that I have not gotten to, so it is exciting that I've been getting to more short story collections. I am a little burnt out on short story collections just because in August I've read 3 short story collections. Well, at the end of July and the beginning of August I read 3 short story collections, so I have been reading. Oh, and I read The Innocence of Father Brown recently. So yeah, I've been reading a lot of short story collections. I'm a little burnt out on them, but it is fun to read them in between reading other things. And The Office of Historical Corrections is one that I really, really wanted to get to. I got this at a library. No, I got this at a rummage sale, which is actually coming up in October. So that's exciting. I can't wait to go back there. We didn't go in the spring version of it, so it's going to be fun to go in the fall version of it. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I had a great time reading this one. If you're interested in horror, if you're interested in women's stories, if you're interested in horror about women's stories, I would definitely suggest picking up Her Body and Other Parties. I think Carman Maria Machado is an amazing author, and I'm excited to find out if Danielle Evans is an amazing author too. If you've read either of the books that I read here, please let me know. If you are interested in joining the TBR spin, feel free to pick 6 books and then pick your July book, or feel free to pick 5 books and pick your August book, or feel free to pick 4 books and pick your September book when the September prompt opens up. And let me know what you got. Let me know what you read for your July prompt if you're participating. Let me know what you plan to read for your next prompt, whatever that may be. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.